but we're going to use technology to help us out with this, or double check our answer. All right, once I see what everyone's put into the poll. All right, almost everyone has something in, so I'm going to give it 30 seconds. So if you haven't finished, that's okay, but maxing at 30 seconds. Okay. For this, we definitely have a variety of answers up here. This is going back to our algebra skills. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to write out after you, let me see if you can see what I'm pointing at. Yes. Right, so here we know we'd have to go through and FOIL this out, which would give you an x squared minus 2x and then a plus 1. But then you have to times that by negative 2, right? And multiplying the positive 3. So kind of jumping to after all that multiplication, this is where we would be at before combining any like terms. Right, so double check your work and see if something doesn't match up there after all the multiplication. So I did skip showing the FOILing first. Hopefully we're okay with that. If you're not, again, you can ask me at the end. I can hang in here a few minutes. But for this problem, all right, I'm okay for this step if you use technology instead or want to check your answer with technology. Because imagine you do all this work and then you simplify to the wrong thing, and then going forward, right, you're going to get everything else wrong. So let me share my screen. And move it over to my one monitor. So we're going to go to Wolfram Alpha, which I think we've only done once when we were talking about the zeros. Make sure I'm sharing the right screen. All right, yes, right now it's a matrix. All right, so again, Wolfram Alpha, you can just type in and it'll pop up. I've already entered it in, so I'm going to show on my second one. But then again, we have our toolbars. So we can enter everything, don't put the inequality, but everything that we had on the left-hand side, which to save time, all right, I have up here. And hopefully, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. I went in, I entered everything, double check, so I didn't have to worry about FOILing out, distributing. And then if we go down, oh, no, let me compute it again. Disappeared. There we go. I had to double check, all right, what I have here that it matched up what we had over there, because maybe I did an input error. Right, but the main thing, scrolling down here, here we go, 4x minus 8, or even factored 4 times our quantity x minus 2. So for those that had 4x minus 8, that is what it simplifies to. If you didn't have that, then try to figure out, going back, right? Where you went wrong somewhere with the foiling or distributing. Any questions here before I take this off my screen? It's a good way just to help you out to check the work. But for that piece, I don't, it doesn't really bother me if you're not going to go by hand for that one line just to get the simplified. Let me go back and stop sharing now. All right, simplified expression for the left-hand side. So that 4x minus 8. And we are going to be coming back to Wolfram Alpha next week and for a few other sections going forward. So we will be using that a little bit more. This is where we're at. And then saying, okay, move the 8 over by adding. And then our last move, dividing by 2. Or not 2, 4. Which I just spoiled the answer. We get our 2. And it's a positive 4, so we didn't have to flip anything here. And again, I kept it with the inequality. If you have x equals 2, that's fine, just to go to our interval. But here, this is different. We don't have multiple numbers. We just have a 2. So we have 2 intervals. Negative infinity to 2. 2 to positive infinity. So again, over here, right, negative infinity to 2, which is usually the easiest number to pick or to plug in. Go back so you can see what I'm pointing at. What would you pick to plug in here? I know what I would pick because I've done the work. Again, it's up to you. Any number you want to pick as long as it's in this interval, and don't pick 2. Yep, 0. That's exactly what I picked. Thank you. So as our test point. All right, then over here from 2 to infinity, I just went 1 above. I said, again, I can't pick 2. All right, the next lowest number, 3. All right, so what do we get? When you plug in 0, and let's go to our simplified part. So let's highlight that. We can go right here. All right, we do not need to go back. If you really want to double check, you could go back to what we had up here. But if we know that the 4x minus 8 is correct, that's why please double check it. Use technology on that. But what do we get when we plug in our 0 here? Oh, negative 8. And that's a lot easier than all the multiple x's up there. All right, what about when we plug in the 3? What do we get when we plug in the 3? Up 4. Again, the catch is this was a negative number. This was a positive number. That's all we're really looking for when we're testing the intervals. And we go back and look at this and say, okay. Whether I look here or you want to go back up to here, it doesn't really matter, again, because we carried it down. All right, less than 0. So less than 0 is negative, which means this interval, our negative infinity to positive 2. Then our set builder notation. Okay, x such that x is less than 2. Questions for this one? Okay. Well, I wanted to put you in a breakout room for this last one, but I don't think we're going to have enough time. So let's just go through it together. Because now we need a rational. I said we were going to do one at the end. We haven't gotten to that. So again, try not to check out quite yet. Or if you are checked out, try to come back in for this one. Or quantity x minus 3 squared over x squared minus 4 greater than or equal to 0. We have a fraction here. What's the one thing we talked about when we went into our rational functions or even rational expressions? Melody, I see you're typing. Make a note of this before you start the problem. This part's not new, even though we threw the inequality in. All right, denominator can't be 0, so where's the restriction on our domain? Where is x undefined? Make a note of this. Where is x undefined at? How do we figure that again? What do we do to figure out where x is undefined? You can either mentally do it or mathematically we went through it. But you have it right. We don't want the denominator 0. So what numbers, if we plug and chug mentally, are going to give us 0 on the bottom? Yep, positive and negative 2. So we could have either plugged and chugged that in. Said, oh, when I plug in positive 2, when I square that, that's 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Same thing when I plug in negative 2. Or we could have went back to what we did before last week, saying take the bottom, set it equal to 0, and say we don't want it equal to 0 for the restriction. And then we would move the 4 over. Say, okay, x cannot be equal, x squared can't be equal to 4, which once we take the square root, that is all from the past 2 weeks. But any questions first with that? We want to make a little mental note of it. You don't really have to write it down. It's not going to be our answer, but it's going to affect our answer, or might. I'm going to make that a little smaller to save myself some room. So we have that mental note to look at before we give our final answer. But we already have equal the 0 on one side. We have our rational expression on the other side here, our left-hand side. So how do I get rid of this fraction? Yep, multiply. Multiply out what we have in our denominator.